Hello, this is Chef John from foodwishes.com with spring vegetable tart. That's right, you know a recipe's gone well when the biggest problem you have is people don't want to eat it because it looks too good. But similar to the great sand paintings of Tibet, after observing its beauty for an appropriate amount of time, it must be destroyed. Oh, and the second most common comment from your guests will be, wow, that looks hard to make. Which, by the way, it is most certainly not. So with that, let's go ahead and get started. And for this, we're going to need 2 sheets of still frozen puff pastry, one of which we will place down on a baking sheet with the parchment paper still underneath. And then once that's set, we will take the other sheet and remove the parchment from the top, at which point we'll place a plate right down in the center. And then what we'll do is take a sharp knife and use that plate as a guide so we can cut a nice ring all the way around the outside. Around the outside, around the outside. And ideally, we're going to pick a plate that will give us about 1 inch to 1.5 inches wide ring. And as usual, we always want to work with puff pastry while it's still very cold and very firm. And by the way, because the plate was warm and the pastry was cold, it actually created a vacuum, which is why it took me a second to remove it. Come on, you gotta love physics. But anyway, once that's cut, we'll go back to our pan piece, and we'll go ahead and paint on an egg wash. And in case you don't know, an egg wash is just 1 large egg that we beat with like a teaspoon of water. Okay, so we'll go ahead and brush that on, at which point we will very carefully remove that ring we just cut, and we will place that on top as shown, making sure we line that up with the edges as best we can. And then once that's been accomplished, we will brush the entire thing with egg wash. Oh, and by the way, I'm using round puff pastry in a round pan, but you can do this exact same technique with a rectangular piece of dough in a regular rectangular baking pan just as well. And then once that's set, we have one more thing to do before this goes in the oven. And that would be to poke our bottom crust all over with a fork, which, by the way, in the business is referred to as docking. Okay, we also would have accepted pricking. And please note, we're only doing the bottom dough and not the ring. Okay, we want that dough around the outside to puff up, but not our dough on the bottom. So by poking this all over before it bakes, that will inhibit that puff pastry from rising. And then what we'll do once that dough's been properly forked is go ahead and transfer that into the center of a 400-degree oven for about 12 to 15 minutes, or until it's lightly golden brown. All right, we don't want to go too dark, because we do have to bake this one more time with the cheese mixture. So we don't want this cooked all the way quite yet. And then, very important as soon as this comes out, is we want to take the back of a fork and press down the bottom of our tart. All right, all over, all the way to the edge of that ring of crust. And it might take a minute, but by doing this warm, we should be able to press that down fairly flat. Whereas if we let this cool first, that pastry in the bottom will tend to break and crack and flake off. Okay, so we definitely want to do this move right when it comes out of the oven. And then once that's been accomplished, we can simply set that aside and move on to our extremely easy to make cheese filling, which for me will start with some room temperature goat cheese. And we'll want to go ahead and season that up with some kosher salt, freshly ground black pepper, and a few shakes of cayenne, of course. And then I think we're also going to want a nice handful of fresh herbs in here. And I'm using a beautiful and aromatic combination of dill, lemon, thyme, and parsley. But really, any kind of green herb will work here. Yes, even that one. And then we'll finish this up by adding the rest of our egg wash, as well as a splash of cream. And that's it. We'll go ahead and take a spatula and mix this until nice and smooth. And by the way, if you're not into goat cheese, which you really should be, but if you're not, this will work with any soft, fresh cheese. All right, things like cream cheese, ricotta, farmer's cheese, fromage blanc will also work. But anyway, we'll go ahead and mix that up, at which point we'll transfer that onto our tart shell. And then using a knife or some kind of small spatula, we will spread that from the center out, eventually all the way out to our outside ring of crust. And then what we'll do once we have that evenly applied is transfer that back into the center of our 400-degree oven for another 12 to 15 minutes or so, or until our goat cheese custard is set and that outside ring of dough is nicely browned. And after about 14 minutes, mine was looking and feeling just right. And then what we need to do at this point is let this cool all the way down before we try to top it with our vegetable salad, which is perfect because that'll give you just enough time to get your other ingredients together. And once it does cool down, we can go ahead and remove that parchment paper. And that's it. Once we have everything cooled and prepped, we can move on to final production. And the first thing we'll need for that is a beautiful base of greens, into which we will stick our vegetables. And I'm going with a very colorful combination of red endive, watercress, and sliced hearts of romaine, which I'm going to toss in a little bit of olive oil. And then once that's nicely shined up, we'll go ahead and transfer that onto our tart and arrange that quickly but thoughtfully. Of course, leaving our outside ring of crust exposed. And then once that's set, we can move on to dressing and placing on our vegetables, some of which I have in this bowl. And I'm going to dress these very simply with just some kosher salt, some olive oil, and a whole bunch of freshly squeezed lemon juice. And we'll go ahead and give that a nice toss until everything's coated, at which point we'll start placing these veggies in and on our bed of greens. And of course, any kind of fresh veggies will work here. Okay, I went with some asparagus tips, as well as some gorgeous rainbow carrots, and something very delicious called Romanesco, which is basically a cross between broccoli and cauliflower. And if times are tough, you could just use broccoli. And not only can you use any veggies you want, you can use them for this in almost any condition. Right, we can use shaved raw vegetables, we could use pickled vegetables, we could use grilled vegetables or roasted vegetables, or what I'm using here, which are pieces of vegetables I just quickly blanched in salted water. And I will go into more detail about all your options in the blog post. But as far as which veggies you put on here and how you cook them, the possibilities are endless, so use whatever you want. I mean, you are, after all, the Fred Astaire of your tart jardiniere. So this is the part of the operation you can really personalize, preferably after a trip to the farmer's market. But anyway, after my lightly blanched veggies were placed on, I continued with some thinly sliced radish, using both the always beautiful watermelon radish, as well as just a plain old regular red radish. Oh, and as you're doing this, if you can't find a good spot for something, just eat it. And then I also decided to tuck in some sliced cherry tomatoes, which, while not technically a spring vegetable, I still thought would pair perfectly with our goat cheese filling. Plus, technically those are a fruit and not a vegetable, as people with nothing better to do will tell you. And then I went ahead and finished up with the peas de resistance, which were some lightly blanched sugar snap peas that I carefully tore off half the pod to expose the peas inside. You know, since I had like 20 minutes to kill. And to me, those really do take this up to another level visually. And by the way, some of the peas are going to fall out if you try to do that. But that's okay, just place them back in the pod. And that's it. Once my vegetables were placed on, I went ahead and finished up with some sprigs of dill that I poked in here and there. And I said sprigs, but I'm pretty sure those are fronds. In any event, I went ahead and poked some in. And then for one final touch, I applied a nice light drizzle of olive oil. And that's it, our drop-dead gorgeous spring vegetable tart is done. So I went ahead and transferred that to a slightly more photogenic surface. And I took way too many pictures. Because I have to admit, I was pretty impressed with myself with how this came out. I mean, let's be honest, when it comes to food styling, I do not have the skills of a Martha Stewart. I mean, I barely have the skills of a Rod Stewart. But if you use enough veggies, anyone, including me, can make this look nice. But anyway, after taking like 100 pictures, I realized it was getting late and the sun was going down. So I went ahead and cut a piece and just ate it right on this platter. And it really was magnificent. Right, that combination of crispy buttery pastry and tangy creamy cheesy filling, topped with our gorgeous array of fresh veggies, really does make for quite a unique and memorable experience. Okay, I think your guests are going to be talking about this one for a while. And even the vegetable haters in your clan will be like, hey, can I get a piece of that? And above and beyond its stunning beauty, what we have here is basically an upside-down salad, which is usually greens topped with some kind of dressing, then cheese, then croutons, which are basically the same components we have here, except they're in reverse order. But anyway, that's it, what we're calling spring vegetable tart. To summarize, I loved everything about this, including it's easy and very fun to make. So whether you're going to do this for some kind of special brunch, like Easter or Mother's Day, or you just get inspired after a trip to the farmer's market, and you're in the mood to create something that will make everyone smile, I really do hope you give this a try soon. So head over to foodwishes.com for all the ingredient amounts and more info as usual. And as always, enjoy.